Welcome in. It's Clippers Talk Live. I'm Adam Moslin, live from the Burbank iHeart Studios, as you can tell behind me. Clipper Nation, it's good to be back with you. We had a couple of them yesterday. One talking about the latest with Kawhi Leonard at practice for the first time in a limited practice setting. And then we had Darian Vazirian, dime dropper as he is known on the YouTube side, to break it all down. But now joining the show, well, she traded in a different shade of red, white, and blue colors with the Philadelphia 76ers for a new one with your Los Angeles Clippers. Talk about an upgrade and talk about a big get for the Clippers organization. To add to the broadcasting greatness that we have outside of myself, it is Lauren Rosen, your newest reporter here with the Los Angeles Clippers. At
That
in-
was such a nice introduction. I can't believe you have to be talking about somebody else.
You're the only one in here, Lauren. Thanks so much for doing this here on Clippers Talk.
Of course, I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm a big fan of your work.
Chat, if you have questions for Lauren, get them in here. She's at Intuit Dome. The Clippers have another practice today, but I do have to start things off with the Shaq meme and say I have to apologize. I wasn't familiar with your game. Being out here on the West Coast, of course, I didn't get to see many of your feeds from the local Philadelphia 76ers side. You're a star. You are absolutely as polished and precise with your words as anyone I've heard. So can you just give us a little bit of your background, Lauren, and where you went to school, why you got into this business, all that stuff?
For sure. Well, I appreciate that. That's extremely kind. Precise is what I go for. If I can't bring everything, I try to always bring accuracy, precision. So I really appreciate that. I am from Houston, Texas originally. I've been all over the place. I was born in the Bay. I have family in San Diego. I have family in South Africa. I'm sort of from nowhere. But I spent my growing up years in Houston, Texas. I went to school at Duke in North Carolina. Then I did more school at Northwestern in Chicago, and that's where I worked part-time for the Bulls. So that was my first NBA experience when I was in Chicago. My first full-time NBA experience was with the 76ers. So I was doing multimedia reporting for them for the last 6 seasons. So I had the privilege to see just sort of the ins and outs of the NBA world. That was when I started going on the road for the first time, my first playoff runs, understanding just sort of how this whole ecosystem works. I got all of that training when I was in Philly, and I loved it there. I had the best experience. Philly really grew me into like a real adult, right? Like not a kid that was hungry in the industry, but someone with a little bit of credibility, maybe with experience, and I'm really blessed that I spent that time there. And then, of course, when a big opportunity opened up on the West Coast with a team that I've admired from afar, I mean, I remember watching the plans of Intuit Dome sort of getting laid, and I'm very online, right? So even if I don't have time to respond to every DM, some of them I shouldn't be responding to, so it's okay. I do see everything, right? So I was very online throughout the process of watching the Clippers build this roster, watching the Clippers build this arena, and to be able to report on behalf of FanDuel Sports Network and be with the Clippers in this building during its first season is really, really cool. I mean, I'm geeked every day. Every morning when I walk in, I'm excited to be here. For those that are watching and listen to you that haven't seen the building yet, I hope you get to soon. It's really special. It's sort of everything that they advertise. Adam, I'd love to hear what you think, but it's sort of everything they advertised and more. Like I'm still learning different things about what this building can do. It's kind of like, do you remember the movie Smart House? It's like if Smart House was an arena, and it's fabulous.
I still kind of pinch myself just when I look at the Halo board. It looks like augmented reality to me. Like I have some
Right?
VR headset on and this can't be real. That's right in front of me. But it is. You
For me,
got
it's
remote controls.
when Norm Powell reaches out of the screen and points at everybody. I'm like, sir, what? It's wild. It's really cool.
The 3D effect at Intuit Dome is spectacular. Lauren Rosen, the Rosen one, is our guest here on Clippers Talk, everyone, as we're getting into the chat here. So who are some of your mentors? Who are some of your inspirations? We have a great broadcasting team. Geez, Alaska, of course, Christina Pink. Who are some of the people you look up to in this industry that kind of got you down this path?
Well, listen, as was sort of the case with you with I was unfamiliar with your game. That's how I feel about this broadcast crew that I'm a part of now, right? And I have been so lucky. I mean, I spoke with Christina Pink for the first time, I think right when I took the job, and she's just, I mean, the ultimate pro. There's a reason she's been doing it at a high level for so long, covering the NBA and the NFL at the same time. Like she's an absolute star. And it's really cool when people who you admire on camera are just as great in person, right? And she has been fabulous, welcoming, showed me the ropes right away. Jeannie, the same way. Jeannie's been awesome. I'm hosting pre and post on the road, and that's not something I've ever done before, right? So to be able to pick her brain and watch her work has been fantastic. And then I got to give it up to Brian and Jim. I haven't worked with the Czar yet. I get to do it this weekend. I'm very excited. But Brian and Jim have made me feel so comfortable on every single broadcast. It's been honestly a dream come true to work with a group that obviously puts out a great product, but is fabulous as people. I mean, Brian couldn't be funnier. Jim couldn't be warmer. They're both so smart, so sharp, so good at what they do. I got really lucky. I could have ended up with any broadcast crew in the league, and I got to be with this one. So to answer your question, who are my mentors, people that brought me up over the last 5 weeks or so? It's those guys. Like I have needed everything, and I have soaked up every piece of knowledge and wisdom that they'll share. But long term, so I was really lucky to work with Kate Scott in Philadelphia. She is the second, her and Lisa Byington started at the same time, the first women to be full-time play-by-play announcers for a major sports team in the US. Kate is fantastic, sort of like what I was saying about Christina. She's fantastic at her job, but she's a better person. It was just such a pleasure. Like that was one of my hardest goodbyes was with Kate Scott. And then I have to shout out the GOAT. I have to shout out Doris Burke, who is someone that I got to know a little bit during the pandemic. At that time, you remember what it was like, Adam. No one really had access to the team. I was a team employee, so I did, right? And when Doris would come in to call national games, she didn't have access to the players. She didn't have access to the ecosystem that she's used to existing in, right? So I think fortunately for me, I was able to be at least a little helpful, sort of giving a little bit of a pulse of the team. And she and I became, I don't know if I can even say friends like that. That might be I might be overstating the relationship, but I love that lady. She's fantastic. But that's how our relationship started, right? And then she's been able to be a mentor for me. She watched one of our games early this season. I think they were prepping to call a game. And so she tuned in to one of our broadcasts. She was texting me and listen, every time, I'm not even going to lie, every time Doris Burke's name pops up on my phone, I geek a little bit because I was a fan of her for so long. And she's sort of don't meet your heroes, Adam.
They
People
say that.
Don't meet your heroes.
Mm-hmm.
If your hero is Doris Burke, you're safe. You can meet your heroes. So that's my little crew, and yeah, I feel really, really lucky to have those people in the corner.
It's Lauren Rosen here on Clippers Talk. We got a question for you from Jonathan Ing. Lauren, how is it with the travel when the team plays 5 games in 7 days? How do you handle that grind when the travel is tough?
First of all, thanks for the question. I don't know how many people have access to this little chat feature, but please keep asking. I want to answer as many as possible. I'm already having such a good time. To answer the question, when the team plays 5 games in 7 days, how do you handle the grind when the travel is tough? Listen, I am super lucky because I've been able to travel with the team, and they do a good job of making sure that travel is super duper efficient, or as efficient as it can be, right? These athletes have to be able to function at the highest level possible. It's not no one cares if I can do the 5 games in 7 days, but James Harden in his 16th season playing heavy minutes needs to be able to function at the highest possible capacity. And they set the ecosystem up so that he can do that despite a difficult travel schedule, right? So I am a beneficiary of the system they set up for the players to optimize their performance. And while it is a lot and it's a grind, luckily I don't have a family of my own. And so this is my top priority, and I just get to be along for the ride and try to get as much sleep as possible. I drink a ton of coffee. I really am. No. It's a problem, but as long as I have 7 or 8 hours of sleep and a strong cup of coffee, I'm good. I'll do 7 games in 7 days because it's a lot of fun and they make it really easy for us. So shout out to all the people behind the scenes that make it even possible to execute something like 5 games in 7 days. Because it is wild. It's sometimes you wake up and you're in your 5th city in 6 days or something. And it's like, whoa, how did we even get here? The fact that they can make it happen, it's really impressive.
If you like coffee, this is the team for you, as Brian Seaman would likely point out with Amir Coffee here. Jonathan, Velasquez, how do you say that, Lauren? Velasquez.
Looks like Velasquez.
Velasquez.
Yeah.
When you say travel with the team, do you take the same bus, the same plane as the squad?
Yes. So we're on the same plane. The buses are broken up into groups. So we're not all on the same bus because there's too many people. There are usually between 2 and 4 buses, depending on the team you're with. I've seen it now in a few different iterations. But yeah, we're sort of all moving as a unit, whether we're all on the same vehicle or in separate vehicles, we move together, which again makes people like me who I could get it done commercially, right? Anytime you do get to do it with the team, it's such a blessing. It makes it so easy. And I will shout out the whole Clippers staff. They've been so welcoming. It's been awesome.
What were your first impressions of Brian Seaman? Me and him are kind of tight. There's some
Uh-huh.
good fun to be had with him shaming
Banter.
me. Yeah, I go to the Cookie Bar at Intuit Dome. He takes a picture, says, "I thought Adam was trying to get to 10% body fat. What is this right here?" We have a little bit of fun, but Brian Seaman is a great guy and great broadcaster, obviously.
He's so sharp. He is so precise. He's so good, and like the fact that I get to, I mean, I'm plugged in every game, right? So I'm listening to the program feed, which is what you guys all hear at home, but I'm watching the game live, right? And being able to hear him call the game in my ears while watching in person, I think is like the ultimate broadcast experience that very few people actually get access to. Like, I'm so lucky. The way that he calls the game, he's so creative. He almost never repeats ways to say certain things. His mastery of the English language is probably the most impressive thing in terms of his broadcasting abilities. But he's just a really good guy, Adam. Like he could have a ton of ego and he really doesn't. He's super humble as they come, kind as they come. Again, I remember my first couple of games just like giving me pointers here and there, but also making me feel comfortable. That's not part of his job, right? But he made it part of his job and it made my job easier. So nothing but positive things to say about Brian, especially when we get into, I know that he can give you a hard time. He does it to everybody. I think that's how he shows love. But I think if Brian's giving you a hard time, he probably likes you, which is good.
Yeah, he definitely likes me then. Lauren Rosen is our guest here on Clippers Talk. If you guys got questions, get them in here. Richard said, welcome, Lauren. Love your contribution to the Clippers broadcast. Go Clippers. Let's talk about this team. You had a great interview with James Harden, who made sure to point out once again that he is not old,
Not
but
old.
you were so snappy with it and making that interview, as comfortable for the interviewee as possible. How do you just kind of cater to the audience a little bit? You got to deal with all these different personalities, different players. How do you kind of just make it so they're comfortable and just feel like they can open up and then give us more insightful information?
Well, listen, I'm really blessed when it comes to a few guys on this roster. I worked with them in Philly. So James and I had a little bit of a working relationship already. So I had a little bit of a head start. I feel really lucky that he has been very warm to me in both of his settings, both of now our settings. So I got a head start on working with James. But what I will say is this whole team has been really easy to work with. I see my job as bringing the fans at home as close to the players as they can get through me, right? So if there's a moment where I could perhaps not just get out of a player what happened in the game, but give them a little bit of personality as well, then I feel like I'm servicing the fan base in a way that is most useful, right? So anytime that I can, I could feel James willing to give a little personality that night, and so I wanted to position him in a way that he could. James is hilarious. He really is funny, and I'm sure you've noticed, Adam. He does these little quips under his breath sometimes, and I want him to like push him out into the ecosystem because he's so smart. He's so funny, and we're having a good time. Listen, he's not playing like he's old, so if he says he's not old, we have to take that at face value.
No, 35 years young right now for James Harden with the way he's playing. Get him in the MVP conversation, Clipper Nation. Bring him
Got
up
to, right? Yep.
all the time. He is deserving of it. So what's the difference in asking a question to maybe Doc Rivers, Nick Nurse versus Coach Lou now with the Clippers pregame and how you have to go about that?
What is the difference? I mean, listen, like this might sound a little cliche, but I think the way that I've always tried to operate, anyone that goes into a workplace, right? You communicate with different people in different ways. Different coworkers like to chat about different things at different times. And the media setting is an interesting one. For coaches, obviously, they address the media a lot more than players do, but it's this weird sort of secondary job that everybody's forced to do, right? You and I it's our primary job to speak about what's happening. Their job is to coach the game that's in front of them. The player's job is to play the game that's in front of them. So I think about I flip it on its head a lot, right? If I'm reporting for a whole game, at the end of the game, no one asks me to go shoot for 3 minutes while everybody's watching. But when a player plays 40 minutes and then has to go do this second job of presenting themselves and public speaking right after a game, like, my job in those settings, to get back to your question, is to make the person I'm interviewing as comfortable as possible and help them optimize their secondary job, right? So to answer your question about Coach Lou versus Coach Nurse versus Coach Rivers, they're all very different. But I feel really lucky now that I have worked with, so I guess 5 NBA head coaches in 7 or 8 years. Don't do the math. No one gets to know how old I am. Don't do the math. But
James Harden style, huh?
I'm extreme. Listen, I started working in the NBA when I was like 12, so it's perfect. But I think just sort of learning people's rhythm is the most important thing. Matching energy is really important. And then making sure that in my position, obviously, I have questions that I need the answers to on behalf of the broadcast, on behalf of the fans. But I want to make sure that the person I'm interviewing is as comfortable as possible. So I try to tee them up as well as I can. Does that answer the question at all?
No, I like that. That was very thorough. Well done. Jonathan wants to know, Lauren, how do you go about prepping for game day to work the sidelines and come up with interview questions? How much of it is prep versus organically coming up with it on the spot?
That's a great question. I think that there is a certain amount of prep that's required no matter what. And I think if you were to ask Brian or Carlo, any of these folks, like, you prep so much for these games and then you end up using very little of it because so much of what you end up discussing is based on the game that's in front of you. So my prep more looks like making sure I know everything that's going on with the team and as much as I can know about the opponent on any given night. So I rewatch our old tape. I try to watch a game from the opponent as often as I can before we play them, right? So just working familiarity with the Clippers and everything that's happening with them on the day-to-day, and then a working familiarity with the opponent, coupled with an understanding of what's happening right in front of you. So to answer the second part of the question, how to come up with interview questions, luckily for me, that I think is sort of the thing that I'm most comfortable doing is talking to somebody, right? Asking questions, having a conversation. So that's almost where I do the least preparation. Most of my preparation comes from when I have to speak and it's just me and I don't have James Harden next to me for most of the people to pay attention to, right? That's where the prep really comes in. And then the interview itself is more about, okay, this is a human being that just did something really cool. How do we help them articulate what just happened to the people that are watching? So as far as prepping for questions, it really is about like, okay, what's most interesting about what just happened? And then trying to get that message from their brain to the folks watching at home.
Different Jonathan here as we talk to the conduit from the players to the fans in Lauren Rosen. Jonathan Velasquez says, which city do you like more? You got to pick one, LA or Philly. Look, just tell us what you've enjoyed so far in Los Angeles that's different than Philadelphia. Let's put it that way.
Listen, what I will say is when I was in Philly, we always circle LA on the calendar, right? That's always the best trip of the year. Everybody loves visiting here. I personally, as I mentioned, I love a good coffee, and there's so much good coffee in LA. And I love a long walk. It's sort of my meditative space, is taking long walks. And in Philly, we would always come to LA for whatever reason. January, February, March, right? So it's insufferably cold on the East Coast. And then you pop off a plane in LA and all of a sudden it's whatever, 60, 70 degrees. You can walk for miles and not get cold. So LA was always somewhere that I circled on my calendar. I can't believe that I get to live here. It's really exciting. Philly has such an important spot in my heart because Philly really made me who I am. But I'm really excited to get to live in LA.
All right.
To answer the question, have been exploring tons of coffee shops and walks, and I go to different neighborhoods. I still don't have a full-time place here, so I'm trying to explore the city as much as I can before I commit to something. So it's just been a pleasure to get to know a city that I knew I already liked as a visitor with way more time. I'm having the best time.
Do you have already your specific custom In-N-Out burger order or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna sound so basic, but I do love protein style because it makes me feel like I'm getting the in and out experience. But like it's healthy. Like if you wrap anything in lettuce, it's healthy, right,
It has to
Adam?
be, even if you get extra cheese, extra
Oh,
spread, grilled
come on.
onions.
And honestly, I love like my one of my guilty pleasures is a sweet treat, right? So I love a strawberry milkshake. So if I'm really fully sending the experience, I'll do a double protein style, add onions, fries, extra crispy, strawberry shake. That's the perfect order.
We got the Lauren Rosen In-N-Out burger order here. So let's say somebody's getting a little bit more combative or giving you some pushback in an interview. How do you have to
Uh,
navigate those landmines like that?
oh man. I mean, I think listen, the goal is to create a product that amplifies something positive that's happening, right? So, usually in an interview, if you're with me, you probably just played really well. So, luckily, I don't end up dealing with what you're talking about that often. A lot of people ask, like, how do you handle questions on the court right after a loss? And I think that's a common misconception. I'm only doing an on court interview after a win. So I get really lucky that I'm dealing with someone that's usually really happy with whatever just happened. And then as far as like difficulty goes, I think that that's, again, like not to revert to an answer I already gave, but it's the way you deal with any difficult conversation, right? Professionally or personally. We all have tough conversations in life, right? And usually you're trying to find a positive way out of wherever the tension is as quickly as possible. So I just treat it like a camera isn't on, right? And if we're in a combative situation and neither of us really wants to be in that situation, it's on me to flip it as quickly as possible into something positive and palatable and keep it moving. But I'm lucky again. Like I really find myself, and these players are so easy. You know what I mean? I find myself lucky and not dealing with what Gonza is asking about nearly as much as I think people think I would. Does that make sense?
Even when you have to ask questions about Kawhi Leonard all the time when Coach Lou doesn't want to hear it.
Well, listen, I'm not the one that's asking, so I'm lucky there as well. I get to focus on other things too, so it's good.
There you go. Well, I'm going to ask the question then to you. Yesterday,
Sure.
Kawhi Leonard returns to practice in a limited form, non-contact stuff, but how excited should Clipper Nation be right now? Because yesterday everybody's freaking out. They hear the report from Dave McMenamin, who was at practice, not always covering the Clippers, but was yesterday. It was kind of a red letter day. And he talks about how if there's not a setback, Kawhi Leonard could return within the next couple of weeks. Just what did you observe in that environment? What did you hear and pick up on what Kawhi Leonard has gone through so far in limited time out there?
Well, listen, we have to start with the fact that he's been around, right? I don't think there's been a single home game where Kawhi hasn't been sat on the bench, like offering pointers. I'm blessed. I get to go to the huddles sometimes, and he's in there telling guys what he sees. He's a very present part of this team, even though he hasn't been playing, right? So I know having him out on the court yesterday, we heard Jordan Miller talk about it, and we heard Ty Lue talk about it as well. It gives them a boost just to understand that one of the best players to have ever done what they're out there doing is now being added into the ecosystem. How can that not give you, right, a jolt of energy? And I know that this is something that they've been looking forward to, that they're excited to have back in the fold. What I think that maybe is getting lost in this whole conversation, though, is how well the Clippers have done in their time holding down the fort without Kawhi Leonard, right? You got to give James Harden a ton of credit, first and foremost, playing in every single game this season up until the most recent one. His first game off was this week. Playing heavy minutes, taking on a heavier load, playing good defense, not just scoring, but distributing and doing all these things, taking this opportunity so seriously, right? So, got to give James a ton of credit, first of all. Then you have to look at the defense that they have created under Jeff Van Gundy. They said they wanted to be a top 5 defense at the beginning of the season, and they've done it. And every time they've slipped out of the top 5, they climb back into it, right? Now you're looking at a all defense, defensive player of the year type player being added to an existing top 5 defense, right? It's tantalizing. Like, how good can this defense become, Adam, with a Kawhi Leonard added to what they've already built? To me, that's the thing we're not talking about enough is, hey, like the Clippers are overperforming perhaps what their expectations were in the aggregate in the offseason. This is a team that knew that they could be good, but I do think that people doubted them externally. They've built something really good, and now you get to add Kawhi Leonard. Like, how cool is that? So I think that there is an energy, there is an excitement, but what I don't want there to get lost, what I don't want to have get lost is that there already was an energy and excitement, right? So we're adding good to good. We're not adding good to bad, which is awesome.
Yeah, it just seems like he's going to amplify all the good stuff they've already been doing so far this season. Kawhi Leonard, it's a perfect fit when you look at a team that is this focused on the defensive end. I think that's where he thrives. He loves actually playing defense. There aren't many guys that do, but the Clippers have a lot of them on this roster. I think they could be the best defensive Clippers ball club we have ever seen in the history of the franchise. Not hyperbole. I think they could be that good, but people want to know, have you met Kawhi? Have you talked with Kawhi yet? Or are we still waiting for that interaction? Because my understanding is if he goes through a full practice, then he does have to speak to the media afterwards. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yep. So at some point, he will address the media formally for the first time since last season. I have only ever worked with Kawhi as a member of an opposing team, right? So I've never worked with Kawhi's never been my coworker before. So this is somewhat new. I've never done a one-on-one with Kawhi. I've never sat down with him one-on-one. But being in the NBA for as long as I've been around, I have interviewed him before. We've been in the same spaces before, but only ever as an opponent. So I've only ever admired his work from afar. And now just really excited. I mean, Adam, he's hilarious. He's so funny. Like I've always been a fan from afar. Just to go back to the point that you were making before, this is a guy that's not shy about the fact that he loves guys that play really hard and he loves good defenders, right? So for him, like I'm just excited to hear what he makes of how well this team has defended so far, right? How well they've done despite what the expectations might have been, and how excited he is to join a group that, to me, checks all the boxes of what Kawhi Leonard has said he likes in a team, in teammates, in a playing opportunity. So I'm excited.
So I'm starting to put the dots together a little bit here. You've been with the Philadelphia 76ers for 6 years, correct? Kawhi Leonard hit a pretty big shot against them in a game 7 back in 2019. I think that fits within the timeline. Were you in the building when that happened?
So I was not actually in the building. I wasn't traveling full time yet. I was traveling part time during that. That was 2019. So that would have been my first season with the team. Wow. What a shot. What a shot. Listen,
Yeah.
I mean, looking back, it was devastating. It was so whew, but like I can see all 5 players on the floor. Like I remember the uniforms, I remember the play, I remember how it felt to watch. Kawhi's been on my radar, to answer your question, for
That's
a minute.
well put.
He made a lot of people feel a lot of pain. So it's nice to be on the other side of that now as well.
Philadelphia does remember. And talking about the team unity with this Clippers team and being around the guys, being in the locker room, Amir Coffey saying he was a part of Clippers radio, interviewing Jordan Miller. I wanted to get him on the radio show. Be like, Amir, if you're a part of Clippers radio, I'm like, all right, come on, do some analyst
Time to
work
show
for me
up.
and Carlo. This will be fun. But just what have you seen from a chemistry standpoint from this Clippers team and how unique they are in that aspect?
Really strong. And I think that in general, that might be like sort of an underrated factor when it goes in when we talk about team building in an NBA franchise, right? You can have the most talented group of players that have ever been assembled. And if the chemistry is not there, they're not going to win. We've seen it. You can have a group that lacks a little bit in talent, but the chemistry and the vibes are really high. And then you see these teams go on championship runs. So I do think it matters. And I do think that this team has a strong chemistry. I think that what you were talking about, Amir Coffey, it's almost like there's a generational thing, right? Amir can be a vet to the Jordan Millers of the world. He can take them under his wing, which has been cool to watch. I think Norm Powell deserves a lot of credit too. He doesn't have the loudest voice in the room necessarily, but he uses it. We think back to that 4-game road trip where he was dealing with the hamstring strain. And I think he hoped to return during that trip, ended up returning just afterwards. But the fact that he was still on the trip and he was still in the huddles and very vocal with the young guys, there's a generational thing that's working well with this crew. They communicate well. They celebrate each other's successes. The vibes are generally very high. And again, now there's like this extra little layer of excitement in the building for sure.
So today they're practicing again. You're at Intuit Dome. Are there any protocols, practice times, schedules that you have to be on as a Clippers reporter while you're there at practice? I know some of it's closed off, especially when Kawhi's doing individual shooting drills or anything like that. But just what are you expecting out of today? What can you expect, or is it different every day at practice?
Yeah, so it's different every day, and it's particularly different this week. We're in this bizarre situation where, if you want to isolate it, right, I think it was one game in 6 days, or one game in 7 days, and 3 games in 20 days. Like the way that the schedule has broke, the Clippers were going and going and going and going and playing every single time. Playing either every day or every 36 hours and no days off. And now all of a sudden there's like a week where they can practice. And it's been cool to see the way that Tyloo's getting them in the gym. They were practicing yesterday. They're practicing again today. I don't know what the practice schedule looks like tomorrow. That's a travel day. Friday, perhaps a shoot around in Denver. So using this time productively when it comes to getting the guys that need recovery. Let's remember that they had a handful of players unavailable in that one game this week based on injury, right? So making sure those guys are able to get back, but also making sure that you're using this time as productively as possible, especially if you're integrating or reintegrating players into the system that you have. It's been cool to watch. So to answer your question, you don't live the same day twice in the NBA, and especially at this unique time in the season where there's this time off, but they're using it productively. It's been cool. It's been cool to observe. So today they're getting started around now. We'll hear from somebody after practice, right? Practice day is work you always will hear from the head coach, and you'll hear from a couple of players. I know the writers work way harder than I do on a practice day because they'll be turning stuff around right afterwards. I get to go explore LA, maybe take a Pilates class after practice. And then anything that we absorb from yesterday, today, even tomorrow, all goes into Friday's broadcast, which is unique for me too. Like, I have way more material than I usually do. Sometimes you don't even have a practice rep or a shoot around rep to work stories into the next game broadcast. We have a wealth of things to talk about on Friday. So looking forward to listening into what Brian cooks up, to what Carlo cooks up, and then try to add whatever I can here and there.
Quickly, last one for you here. What are you hearing regarding Derrick Jones Jr.? He's expected to be out at least 2 weeks. Is Amir Coffey going to be in the starting lineup? Is it going to be Nico Batum? What have you gleaned so far?
Well, listen, I mean, Amir did a great job when Norm was out of the lineup. I try to stay away from hardcore predictions like those because I only look stupid when I'm wrong. I leave it to the professionals, but Amir did a great job when he stepped in for Norm. Obviously, it's challenging when you lose someone like DJ because he's even when his stats don't shine the loudest, his impact has been there all season. His defense, his quickness, he appears to be at least a really easy player to play with. So we don't know exactly where they're going to miss him most next. You alluded to it. He's going to be out for at least a couple of weeks. It's an opportunity for guys that have already been stepping up, right? It's an opportunity for guys that have stepped in while other guys have been out to maintain their position in the rotation. But I think defensively, they're going to miss him a lot. It was good, though, to see he was still in the building yesterday. He was still shooting after practice yesterday. So down but not out, I would say, is DJ for now. And of course, as is always the case with like a lower body injury, you just want to make sure that he gets back. I remember James Harden saying the same thing about Norm, like, get back to exactly where you want to be so that we have you for the stretch run, right? Take as much time as you need. Don't rush back. And luckily, because this is such a switchable group, this is such a defensively proud and apt group, there are guys that can step in, right? DJ is one of the top defenders in the league, certainly in the conference, maybe in the league. But there are other great defenders on this team that are going to be able to step in while he's gone, which is good. That's the good news. But of course, you want him back as soon as possible. He's been so much fun to watch all season long on both ends of the floor.
She's your newest member of the Clippers broadcasting team. It is Clippers reporter Lauren Rosen. Lauren, we are lucky to have you. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming here on Clippers Talk and introducing yourself a little bit more to the fan base. They love you. It was listener requested. We had to do it. We got it done. And somebody in the chat, somebody in the chat even threw down $20. So I'll give you half so you can get that in and out order.
Oh my goodness. Thanks so much. Well, listen, I hope you'll have me back. If it's really true that they want me, I hope I get to do this again. This was a pleasure, Adam.
Highly sought after. Lauren, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, guys.
I'm Adam Oslin for Lauren Rosen. This has been another edition of Clippers Talk